Hi folks, so we're going to get started with our second drawing in two-point perspective, and I've got a student sample up here from the assignment directions, and I just thought we would just talk just very briefly about what we're doing in this assignment and what you're going to be learning, what you have learned from it. Um, so this assignment, what you're doing is you're taking that idea of the house shape, with the rectangle and the triangle that you put on top from the previous assignment, and you're putting it actually into a scene to make it look like a house. You're taking it from just those shapes to making it look like a house. And this does seem always a little more complicated than it actually is. Um, but so let's just break it down. So you're taking the rectangle with the triangle and then maybe adding some details to make it look more like a house. Like maybe you're adding some windows, maybe some siding, just doors, that kind of thing. Now this is a more complex house than I expect most folks will do, but it still just shows basic shapes that were just detailed on using straight edges and using vanishing points. Just like we talked about in the group critique in milestone 1, just by using your ruler and the vanishing points and geometric shapes, you can just create a lot of things. Like this was all, you'd see the siding here along the sides here, that was all done just with the vanishing point. This little chimney here was just kind of a rectangle that was placed on the roof with just, again, going right back to those vanishing points. Now this does have some more sort of like trees and things, which you're more than welcome to add, but you don't necessarily have to add trees if if you don't want to, like more organic shapes. You can keep it very geometric. If you do add trees and shrubbery and things like that, you can keep it very sketchy. Like you can just use some of these as an example, some of the ones in the drawings in the student example, or you can actually just Google architectural trees or architectural shrubbery, and you'll get actually examples of how people who do these types of drawings create the shrubbery, and they're always very, very basic and kind of sketchy because it's all about just kind of putting the focus on the buildings. So that's why they're usually very simple to do. So you might want to check that out. Um, and so when we're adding the house and any of the details around it, you might want to use your imagination and fill it in different ways. And just to kind of make it look more like a scene. Like maybe you'd have a few little clouds in the sky. I'll have some recommendations if needed in your drawings. And then the other thing we're doing, which I think is really interesting, is we're doing something called vertical convergence, which you can see the vertical convergence very clearly here in this one in the form of the fence. And vertical convergence is actually pretty similar to the idea of what, in the previous assignment. Remember when we created the triangle on top of the rectangle? You can actually see it right here. You see the cross that creates this, um, the pitch of the roof in the triangle, where you divided it. That's actually the same way that you're going to be creating the other convergence here, like the vertical convergence is. You can actually see the lines here of how that was created. And I may uh, you know use someone's drawing to do it again, because I know the tutorials, it's always good to see it again. But this is the vertical convergence, and it's just a formula. It's a formula for creating the sense of these shapes going back in perspective, since we need to figure out a measurement for, can you see how they get closer and closer as you go further back? And this little formula that you use creates that sense. Just helps you figure it out. That's all it is. And then you can do the same on the other side. And you'll notice on this side, you can see that it's, even though we're moving further away in the same sort of length when you look at the page, this side is not as close. Can you see how we're still pretty far apart here compared to this one? And that's just because the vanishing point is further away on this side. So it kind of is slower to get closer together. But again, you don't have to worry about that because the formula takes care of it. And then the same thing with the horizontal convergence. Now this, I don't think we have a super terrific example. Let me just look here, what we've got here. This is there's more horizontal convergence here, although the way this was photographed, it's a little hard to see, these lines. But a sidewalk is, a really great example of horizontal convergence. And it actually is the same kind of method as the vertical convergence of just using a formula to divide the spaces, in the sidewalk, the different parts of the sidewalk. Okay. Now, let me go back to the other one here. Vertical and horizontal convergence, they're really great. Again, they're really great to know because you can use these through the rest of the class. In any kind of drawing, kind of creative drawing you're doing, you can put a fence in or a sidewalk or you can, put paneling on the walls or, figure out, maybe put lamp posts in or whatever. You can do it on the inside, interiors or exteriors. You can do floor tiles with this. Um, Again, there's, all kinds of sort of ways you can figure out, oh, hey, I want to add this little kind of, you know, thing here that's going to use vertical convergence. So it is a really cool thing to understand, not just for this assignment. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Let's get going with the drawings. Angela, so I thought I'd start with yours because you mentioned that you were struggling a little bit with the horizontal and vertical convergence. So yeah, I think it's actually really great that you just posted your drawing as is, in the draft phase without completely finishing it. And that's definitely something that folks, if you run out of time but you have something going, just post your drawing. That way you can be included in the group critique. And as long as you're far enough along, we can always, work on it, and then you can continue on with your drawing. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with your house here. That looks so. Yeah, that looks good. You've got it. I think I'm just gonna see approximately where your vanishing point ends. So it's sort of just about there. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. It looks like you've started adding some details, which is great. Some windows and doors, definitely looking good. And with your details up here, that looks good. It looks like you've got a little bit of like kind of an overhang here. That can always be a little bit tricky. In a way, I would just maybe take that out for now, this little overhang right here, and just kind of keep it simpler. Um, those overhangs can always be a little bit tricky. This part right in here. Um, okay, so I'm going to take this out here. One thing, so before you keep going with this, I would take and put your horizon line in a little darker. So I'm going to kind of guess at it, maybe at a little bit higher. So this horizon line, sometimes, we don't always need to have the horizon line really drawn in like in the previous drawing. But when you're working on like a scene like this, like a landscape, so you don't have to draw it through the house, of course, or even lightly, but this horizon line can be part of your composition. So you can draw it in here, and then maybe you could add some details back here. You can figure out what you want to have happening here, but it actually creates a sense of like a place, like a important kind of guide within the drawing, in terms of the composition. And same thing here, you'd want to sort of draw it behind those trees. If you could also, if you wanted to, let me see here, grab a, you could have like this, so this is flat, like where I grew up, the prairies, but you could have like maybe some, this is a really terrible line here. Let me see if I can fix it a little bit. So you could have something that's a little bit more, who knows, like something going along here that's like a little mountain range, or if you want to, just something to create a little bit more visual interest in the back. Okay, and also the reasons we want that horizon line is it's going to help us with the horizontal convergence. And I think you've actually started working on the horizontal convergence and it looks pretty good. So I'm just going to actually use your horizontal convergence to just demonstrate for anybody else who might need some help with that, how it's done. So the first thing you do with horizontal convergence is you just decide where it's going to be. In this case, it's a sidewalk, which is oftentimes what we use horizontal convergence for. But you could also use it for a road, and if you want to have markers on the road, those lines in the middle of the road, you can use horizontal convergence for that. But you always start by just drawing in, like you have here, the sides of it, like the width of it. That's your starting point, like so. And then what you do is you take and you draw in your very first square. And I'm going to use your lines right here. They would go back to our vanishing point. Let's see, back here. And you want to start, as the video tutorial talks about, with a fairly large square. The reason why you want that is so that you have room to make them go smaller and smaller. And then what you do is you take and you go between this point and this point right here up to the horizon line. And this is going to be your diagonal vanishing point. So this becomes a new vanishing point that you're going to use. And now you're going to just use that. You're going to go through this point right here, closest to us, and you're going to just draw it up here, and where it meets this end is where your new line is. And I think you've already got that. And then you would send this back to your vanishing point. And I can't see the vanishing point, so I'm going to just use your lines right here. And that's all you do. And that actually creates your sidewalk. And so you want to keep those lines in place when you do this. Don't erase them. Keep them as dark enough so that we can see them, the construction lines. And so you can go all the way back here and take it all the way back to this edge here. Okay. And then here too, you just want to darken those a little bit so we can see those. You'd use the same method here, creating a new, like in this case, you'd create a new shadow or diagonal vanishing point for this guy. This would go up to your line here, and then you would do the same thing here. So this actually becomes a new, and then this would go back to your point, and I can't see the vanishing point there. So, but that would go all the way and construct up there. Okay, so keep those guidelines in, lightly sketched in. Okay, so in terms of the vertical, I'm going to remove these guys here so that we don't have so many lines. And so you've got your vertical vanishing point, your vertical convergence in the form of these trees, which was nice touch. And okay, actually we don't need the horizon line. Well, actually I'll keep it here sort of to get a sense of what I'm doing here. So for this guy here, what you would just do is do what you've done here, which is create the height of what you're doing here, just sort of the sense of where it's going to go. And then this is your first element, which is what you've done here. And then what you're going to do is take and just decide where your next one is going. You just plop that in, just like you've done. And again, you want that to be as large as possible, or not as large as possible. You just want a good bit of space. And then in this one, what you're actually going to be doing is creating a perspective center here, like so. And what that will do, let's just take it back, is it will help us understand where, let's just kind of, I'll just place it here. You want to, again, keep all these guidelines in when you're doing it. So I would just go, with all of what you've done here, is just go back and lightly sketch those guidelines in. And then you go from this first point through the center of this point right here, and that is where your next line is going to be, your vertical thing. Whatever you make it into, whether it's a fence or a little tree like you have, light poles, electric poles, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, so you've done that too. So it looks like you actually really understood all of that pretty well. So I just essentially used your drawing to, help other folks. I hope you don't mind. Okay, so that's the main thing here is I would work on it and maybe fill out your composition just a little bit more anywhere you have an empty space. You can always, add something to it. Even something like you have a little space in here, so you could even add a little road there, just something simple. You don't have to have a lot of detail to activate spaces. Like when you have an empty space, you can put in a little tiny wisp of a cloud, and suddenly that space becomes part of the composition. So, and these lines here that you've drawn in here, these are great. These actually help you figure out where your composition is and what you need to fill in. So those are changeable. When you work on a drawing, you can actually sometimes even add those later on to box your composition in, but it helps you figure out where things are going to be and what's empty space and what's taken care of. Okay, so that's what I keep working on. Okay, Amy. Yeah, the chimney probably wouldn't be considered horizontal convergence because it's not going back. Like elements aren't, repeating back in space. Like maybe if you had like three chimneys going back, which you could probably do, then you get that, or I should say vertical convergence. I'm calling it horizontal, I meant vertical convergence. But vertical convergence too, um, like if you imagine like a big office building with just all, windows in perspective, that would have vertical convergence in it, So there's a lot of, different places for that. Um, we'll go back to that in just a minute. So let's just start with your house. That looks good. You've got some nice details on there. It looks like it's working really well in perspective. Um, I liked, uh, I like the windows you've added and the shrubbery. That looks really good. And I also like these trees back here. That's really nice the way you have them receding back onto the horizon. Um, and your horizontal convergence, nice. You've got all the guidelines sketched in. That looks really good. I would just keep going here. Just kind of, it looks like it ends a little abruptly. So I might just kind of, I like the idea of it kind of fading away, but then maybe you'd sort of maybe just add a little tiny bit more to kind of fade it away so that even those edges, does that make sense? So it kind of evenly fades away, or it doesn't even have to fade away. You can have the lines in place. Um, for your vertical convergence here, I think you understand it, which is great, but because it's coming out of the composition, I would be inclined to maybe use the space here to add something maybe right here, sort of layering over the front of the house. It could be a very simple kind of mesh type fence so you could see the house through it. But I might, be inclined to um, include even another example of that, so to really get it in there. I think that's about it. You've got a lot of space in your sky that's empty. I think a few kind of wispy clouds would be nice, very simply done. Lightly, you could just lightly kind of trace something into the sky. Um, and yeah, and that's about it. Anything else you think you could add? But otherwise, I think it's really coming along nicely. And yeah, so this looks really good. I think you've got all of the different parts in here, which is wonderful. You've got your horizontal, your vertical convergence, and you've got your house built in here. So I would say, so just maybe one thing I noticed that it looks like, I think some of the detail of your drawing looks like it got a little bit lost in your photograph. Let me see. Oh, that didn't really help. So maybe I might rephotograph it again and then bring it into, let's do an auto contrast. See, that's just making it look a little darker, which doesn't really help. So maybe photograph it again, maybe having a little more light in the room. Sometimes that can help, and see if you can get it just a little bit clearer so that there's, the paper is a little whiter and your lines are a little darker. And then I might just add a little more detail to your house. You could even add some more windows here or some more doors. You don't have to make it, you can make it however you want to design it, just add a little more detail. Okay, so if you look here, see this line right here? Let me see, I'll just get it a bit longer here. This is um, your triangle that goes at the top. Now, just like the previous drawing, this line right here, you have it kind of drawn here. This would actually be parallel. So it would be going, so, you sort of have to eyeball it, but it would actually be going a bit more like that and then joined up at the top like you have it. It looks a little weird. And again, that's just because of how close it is to the vanishing point. But that would be the correct placement for it. Um, and What else could we do with this? So I would darken these lines too. So this is where your drawing ends, right here. It's where you've chosen to end it. So that means you don't necessarily have to deal with any of this space anymore. So, just kind of darkening these edges a little bit really helps you visualize what space you have. And, this is one of the things we're doing with this particular drawing is we're introducing this idea of composition. where you kind of look at all the space and see how it relates to one another. And I think at this level, the main thing is, you just kind of want to fill your space, so you could add a tiny bit of clouds. Maybe you could continue this sidewalk here. You just kind of, even if you wanted to, like bring it down a little bit, why not? Like bring it all the way down here. That way you fill this space. That would be awesome. Uh, and I think that would be, yeah, that's all I think you need to do here. You maybe even could, because your fence is also kind of moving out of the space, you could actually just bring in the fence this way, like measure it out where this pole would be here. And you'd only see part of it, but that would be awesome too. It's always nice to have things kind of cut off in a drawing, cropped out. It leads the eye in the space. Okay, all right, that's what I'd recommend. Okay, Rhonda. Oh yeah, that's exciting about getting that book, the mindset book. That's something that I mentioned in my bio. Uh, and it's just this really interesting book that I thought related to, learning things, especially in art and design, where I think that a lot of people think that, I know I did, that there were just some people that are naturally gifted in those areas. And yeah, sure, some people do have a little bit of, maybe little tiny bit of extra aptitude, but in general, if you see somebody who's drawing really well, chances are they've studied drawing before, even maybe it was in school, or maybe they even had a parent that showed them how to draw, or something like that. They were exposed to it, and I think that's really true of not just drawing, but so many other things in life where we make assumptions about how skills actually, you get skills, and really a lot of it is just, or the majority, if not most of it, is just practicing, learning and practicing, spending the time doing it. Okay, let's get on to your drawing, Rhonda. Let's see, did you say anything about your drawing? Okay. Okay, so, oh yeah, I like your house. I like all the detail you've added into it. Um, I like the kind of that, the front, like the way you've built this extra house in front. Again, it's just a really nice example of taking um, the simple rectangle shapes, and just by combining them like this, two triangles and two rectangles, you get this great new structure. And yeah, it looks good. And I like the way you created all of these guidelines to create it. And let me just see here. Let me just do an auto color. Yeah, yeah, that darkened it a little bit. There we go. Oh, actually, partly that was my screen too. Yeah, and so you've got some really great examples here of horizontal and vertical convergence, good places for them, lots of examples, which is awesome. I would just, double check a little. So this one right here, you want to make sure when you start, so let me just use this line right here. So this is going to be exactly where you have it here. I just drew it here to kind of get it into place, this first square. So this is your very first square right here, it looks to be. Let me just go back here. Did you put that in there? That's where it would be. If you have two sidewalks intersecting. If you don't, then you can kind of take that first square and really kind of place it anywhere, like in any position. But for this, we would want to do something like this, I think. And then, so your shadow vanishing point now is going to be up here. I think this is your horizon line right there. Okay. And then what you're going to do is actually go this way and then go from this side. So this actually is where your next sidewalk line would be, right in here. So this is it. And then you'd go through here again, go up, and where this touches there is where your next line is. So you just want to make sure that all of these lines you have going upwards are actually going to go to these lines. And these ones right here are going to go back to this vanishing point. So we can actually, since this is going through, we can actually use the same diagonal vanishing point here for this side because it's the same first square. So then we would go and we would start doing this. Okay. So then we'd go and we'd go up here, I'm not being as accurate as I could, but hopefully that gives you the idea. So that's what you would be doing here. And you would actually do the same thing for these little lines in here. These now become horizontal convergence. And let me show you how to do that. Let me undo. We're going to have a whole new series of lines here. So let's just get rid of this and go back. Okay, so just to kind of make it easier to see. So in this one, so you've got it started here, which is great. I'm going to actually just start from here rather than down here, even though you're going to continue it down there, just because it'll be easier here. So what you do here is you kind of like take the same approach as the sidewalk. So we're going to start by making the very first square here. And the square, what the square is going to be, so here's our first, let's just say our first measurement. And we're going to put one of these stripes in there, one of them. And folks, if anybody else if you're interested in doing something like this, that it's, we're just going to adapt the method here. And then what we would do then is, let me just take, I'm going to grab here a nice sort of light line. I'll come back to that blue here, but we're going to go right down the center here. You could actually measure out what's the center, but I'm going to eyeball it. So that's going to be, actually maybe I'm going to make that even a little bit lighter so it becomes more, okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's go back to our blue here. And what we're going to do is just decide how much of the line we want to fill this space in. And you can just sort of think about your highway experiences. So I'm going to just kind of go in there, and make it maybe two-thirds of the space, right? And then all we have to do is use we should have done this first, but let's go up to our horizon line, get our diagonal vanishing point for this side. You're going to have so many lines here. You have so many examples, which is awesome. So yeah, feel free to, if you don't want to have so many, to remove them a little bit. But you can see here that I'm just measuring out my next little measurement area here, like so. And then I'm going to put in my stripe 2/3 of the way. You see that? It's really just using this method again, like I mentioned earlier, you can do so many things with this method. So now here is my stripes. Now this would look better if all of my guidelines were light gray, but you can see how you start measuring those lines, and you'd want to do that here. You can just start doing that here all the way through your drawing. Okay, so those are the main things. So you want to also, something you want to really do here that I think is going to, help you just in terms of like reducing how much you have to do in the drawing, is you want to use, in the video tutorial, it talks about boxing your drawing in. And you can actually do that afterwards, that's fine, but it can save you work at the beginning. So what you do is you just pick from, like, you want to pick within the vanishing points here, from here to here. Give a few inches on either side of the vanishing point. You're going to pick where your composition ends. So it's actually going to be ending, you could even end it here if you wanted to. Probably that's not a bad place to put it, because you don't want to get too close to your vanishing points because everything gets a little distorted there. And you could even go like right here, so you don't have to worry about going all the way to the edge of your paper. You could go a little higher up here if you want to see the peak of your roof, but you don't have to. So that's where you're going to have to worry about your drawing. So you don't have to do anything out here, or around it. Can you see how much better your drawing already looks? Like how the composition looks so much more filled in and just feels really a lot more complete? Okay, then so I would take your vertical convergence here, and using the method that we discussed before, just make sure you add those guidelines in to show how you constructed this. I love the way you drew your trees. Just kind of do the center X, just what we did at the very beginning. All right, I think once you get this kind of all working, it's going to be a really terrific drawing. And I also, this one here too, I just make sure you keep you use the construction method to work with these. So you might want to erase that and start over. And at the very beginning of your fence, make sure that you're working with a really nice big unit, instead of a small little bit, because it's really hard So, something more of a chunk like this. So it's harder to do any of the convergence if your first step isn't a fairly large one. Jordan, all right, so I have your drawing in Photoshop. And so what you want to do here is when you just bring your drawing back into Photoshop and then go up to image and then image rotation. So let's see, image rotation, and I always get a little confused about counterclockwise, and so I think we want to go counterclockwise. It doesn't really matter, you can always just adjust it. There we go. And then when you save it again, it's automatically going to save it at this orientation. So that's good to know. Okay, so let's see here. Here is your vanishing point. So I'm going to just pop in your horizon line here where I think it is. Maybe right here. Just sort of get a sense of it. And so that's something you want to do here is just add in your horizon line. Just like we talked about before, you don't have to, run it through your house or anything, but, just to have it like a place where the sky meets the ground, that would always be there. Or, unless you had some mountains or change in elevation, that could change it. But otherwise, it's just going to be something like that. Okay. Oh, yeah, I like your house. I think I love all of the windows here, just kind of the way it's been built. Let me see here. So if you can, it would be great to see uh, the other's vanishing point, even though it looks like it's pretty much off the edge of the page. So I can see it here at this edge, but I'm not able to see, how it works on this side, which can be really useful. Actually, let's just construct it. So it looks like for some reason on the left-hand side, your vanishing point got up above the horizon line. So when you set this up, so I'd recommend starting, keeping your vanishing points on the edges of your paper, like on this side is great. Even if you open your pad and you want to put it outside of the pad, that's okay. But you want to make sure that you kind of construct it along your horizon line. And I'm kind of guessing at your horizon line because I'm just kind of using it right here and drawing it across. So I don't know if I've got it perfectly accurate, but it does look like you probably want to adjust it a little bit. Um, and um, and then when you do that, then it's probably going to maybe change the position of your house. So I might just start this again, use your composition exactly as is, like your house design and your trees. I think all that looks really good. But then just make sure when you set it up that you set up your horizon line first with your vanishing point on the edges of the paper. Use the video tutorial to help you set it up. It's very useful. And then, again, I would just sort of set up what you have, which looks good with your house. With your vertical convergence, you've got some really good elements here. Make sure you're showing the construction lines of how you created these elements, which, would be, here's your center here, and then here's this. So just keep these guidelines in, that you use to construct them. They're just very important, I think, especially at this point. Even in, when you get more advanced, I think it can be really helpful to see how somebody put together their drawing. It's kind of a beautiful, I think, a beautiful part of the drawing. So mine is looking a tiny bit different than yours. Again, once it that, when you're doing this over somebody's drawing, it can do that, just because you know. But it looks like you've gotten it pretty much. But then I would do this in vertical construction as well, just the same way as you've done this, making sure you go through and do that. And then add an example of horizontal convergence. And you've got this road here ready to go. So you can just, fill that in. That'll look beautiful. Whatever details you want to add. But that's what I would start working on here, is just making sure you set up the most important thing is to have your horizon line with your vanishing points on it. Okay, and those video tutorials from the instructions are super useful for getting you where you want to go with that. Okay, Christina. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to start with your presentation here. You could probably just maybe touch it up a little bit here in Photoshop. It's always nice to do that, just kind of lighten it, make sure that the paper is white and black and white. Okay, you've got your house here, and let me just zoom out just a tiny bit. Okay, so there's your vanishing points. Um, so with your house, with your house, um, what I might do with your house is actually bring your house downwards a little bit into, so it's instead of sitting on the horizon line, it actually goes onto the ground, because right now it's sort of it's a little bit unnatural the way it's sitting there. And to do that, you just bring one of these lines down and then just bring this, bring this down like so, and bring this back to your vanishing point back here. And now you've got sort of your house that now is in the space. So I would do that, and then you can just kind of take and bring your, your doors down. Maybe you could add a few more details to your house, maybe some windows, just to give it a little more detail. Um, okay, and then you've got some examples here of vertical and horizontal convergence. So I might just go through here and just do the, make sure that you're really setting it up um, accurately, keeping your guidelines in place. I think you probably have here, but let's just double check. Yeah, it looks maybe, it's pretty close. What I would say is just, I think what's getting in the way is that you want to just be a little more accurate with your drawing. Be really precise, sharpen your pencils, make sure that you're really, really being careful with how you set things up throughout the drawing. That, again, accuracy is so important when it comes to perspective. And I would use the method that we use to create these lines, in a previous part of the group critique where I demonstrated how to create these lines in the highway. That'll look really awesome when it's done. And then, keep finishing your fence. And then finally, just make sure that you're boxing in your drawing. By boxing in, I mean like creating a sense of where that composition is going to end. You want to make sure it doesn't go all the way to your vanishing points, because those vanishing points are, where things get a little weird in your drawing in terms of um, the vanishing points distort things. So decide on your paper where you're going to end it. And I'm just kind of picking spots. You might choose something different, but within sort of roughly around these areas is where you want to draw your lines in and box these in. So I would probably just start this again, and really kind of practice your horizontal and vertical convergence a little bit more. Even just take a scrap piece of paper and practice it, and set it up again. Pay attention to your craft and making sure that things are really precise and as accurate as possible. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that we can do in perspective, just in order to learn it and also to create that sense of three-dimensional space. Okay, Michelle. All right, I'm just going to also maybe just turn your drawing into black and white here. There we go. Yeah, just a couple of adjustments. Okay. Yeah, I love your house. You've a lot of nice detail there. Windows, doors, that looks really great. Um, and let's see, you've got a sidewalk here. So let's actually just build the horizontal convergence together just to take a look at it. So here's your horizon line. You need that to get your diagonal. It looks like I see what happened. It looks potentially like yours, you put it a little low. Is that where you put it right there? I think it's going to be just a little higher right here. So we'll just take this spot where you've placed it here, which is great. So now we've got our first step. And then this is going to come back up here, and where it crosses, it's going to be the next step. So it's actually going to be, it looks, at least by my calculations here, a little narrower than you have it. So keep those constructions lines in, for your final submission, put them back in and construct it, and have all of these constructed, within the drawing. Let's just remove all that so we can see it. I think your vertical convergence looks good. Nice job with that. So I would just work on this a little bit more. And then, looks like you started boxing it in. Just finish it, box this in, start boxing it in here, wherever you want to end it. And then you're going to end it here somewhere, on on this side of the vanishing point, just so that you build your composition. Then you can sort of evaluate, hey, is there anywhere where I maybe need to, add in a little bit more? It's like, do I have an empty space? And then maybe also just put your horizon line in a little bit more darkly in there, just like I've done behind things. That really helps to kind of center things. Maybe work on the craft a little bit, of your pencils, making sure that it's nice and neat. But yeah, I think you're going in a good direction, just a few things to fix. Okay, Michelle, apologies to Ashley and you as well. I accidentally called Ashley Michelle in the previous critique. I think for some reason, Photoshop was doing something funky with the file names. It's been doing that today, so I don't know why. Anyhow, so, okay, Michelle. Yeah, this looks good. So you've got this really nice log cabin. I love the way that you just used your vanishing points to create the siding on it. Looks like logs or paneling or whatever you're doing with that. But that's a really awesome way to just kind of work with that. And you've got some really nice elements here in, it looks like some vertical convergence, although you might want to, let me just look at this a little bit further out. Yeah, so I would say that what I would add to the drawing, I think everything looks awesome in what you have done, but maybe add a little bit of a stronger example of horizontal convergence, like maybe even a little sidewalk, or something like here that would be an example of that right in this space, and maybe even a little example of a stronger example of vertical convergence. These are getting really close, but you'd want to show that the method of constructing them with the X's, so that and they'll be evenly spaced. So you could do like a little fence, where you have space. It could even be like a short fence. It doesn't have to be tall, and then maybe a little sidewalk, in the space you have in the front. And that's, I think, the only thing you really need to add here. Okay. Oh, yeah, last thing you'd want to do here is just make sure you box this in as well. I know boxing things in doesn't sound very romantic, but it really does help the composition. So in your case, just again, you just want to stay a little bit away from your vanishing point on either side. So I think this one's here too. So you could even, I mean, you could get a little closer, um, you know, a little like you've got this tree which is sort of like on it. And so you could probably come a little closer in, but just kind of box it in from the bottom too and the top, just to kind of really, even though I think your composition is working fairly well, without that, it's still really important to do that. So that's something else you want to do. Okay, that's it, everybody. Great work, and I look forward to seeing your final submissions this week.